So our next speaker, Niemann. Niemann is the founder of AgriSync, the first customer service platform built specifically for agriculture. He spent 14 years at Microsoft. He grew up on a farm in Kansas and received an agriculture degree from Kansas State and an MBA from the University of Iowa. Prior to Microsoft, he worked for Syngenta. He currently lives in Des Moines, Iowa. Everybody, let's give it up for Niemann.
Kaylee, appreciate it. All right, good afternoon. We can turn the lights up just a little bit. They saved the sexy part of agriculture support for late in the afternoon, so I'm so excited that you all stayed. And Kaylee, when she was first getting started, we used to get connected and talk a little bit about sales and best practices, and so I'm glad to see, by the way, that she's taking more advice from the folks at FunnelWise, because I was probably the one that said, oh yeah, send a pizza to their house. That'll be awesome. That'll work great. So pleasure to be with you. I want to give a shout out to the Des Moines Partnership, Mike at Square One, for having me here today, and also for pulling all of us together as a community of entrepreneurs, investors, community supporters. Just a great set of sessions. I've learned a ton today, so let's give a big welcome or thank you to those guys for supporting it this afternoon. So we're going to talk a little bit about this notion of how do we grow, how do we accelerate sales through kind of our channel and through our customers. And I want to share with you both perspectives that I learned while I was at Microsoft, and then also a list of things I've learned that are broken as I go through and try to build out a startup. And so it's important to recognize this afternoon that a lot of our speakers today have come up and they said, hey, here's the list of things that we figured out and passed on a lot of knowledge. I'm going to share with you a lot of things that we don't yet have figured out. And I was joking with Mike when he asked me to do this. I said, well, this will be a good exercise because it'll force me to kind of write down the things that as a young startup, an early stage startup, we're still trying to learn. And I'm sure some of you might be able to relate to that. When we see kind of good best practices and how to do things right, at the end of the day, there's probably still only 1 or 2 or 3 of you that are working on this, and execution is extremely hard. And just the notion of entrepreneurship is really hard. As Kaylee mentioned, I did spend some time at Microsoft before kind of jumping off the ledge and doing a startup. And some of you are like, why would you leave the cushy world of Microsoft or these enterprise sales things? And my wife asked me that question on a daily basis. In fact, she told me this morning we were going for a walk, and she said, I think I've got an interesting thing that I should do. She said, I should find some of your fellow entrepreneur friends, get their spouses together, and we should write a book about what it's like to support our spouse's midlife crisis of doing a startup. So that's the type of motivation and encouragement I hope you all have when you're at home. So no, she's been awesome. And I would just tell you that it takes courage to do a startup. I remember distinctly, in fact, I was flying home on my last cushy incentive trip for a sales incentive trip from Microsoft. And that's when my wife and I finally decided that we were going to choose courage over comfort. And she was going to be with me in this journey of pursuing a dream to start up a new business. And I think for all of you in the room that are building out new businesses, it does take courage to do that. It's hard. There are definitely a lot easier paths. So the fact that you're pursuing that and encouraging that is a good thing. And what I want to share with you is a little bit of what we've learned on our journey at AgriSync. And again, what we do at AgriSync is we connect experts with farmers to solve problems. And so some people have called us the Zen desk of agriculture. We'll take that. But if you think about the way in which we feed the planet, a lot of that has to do with new practices, new technologies, and some of that's complicated and hard. And so what we do is we connect the smart experts that are out there that a farmer relies on, and we allow them to provide real-time communication and support to their farmer customers. And as I've said many times before, if you're going to build an ag tech startup, you should absolutely do it in Iowa. So tell all your friends that and tell them to come in and sign up for the Ag Accelerator as well. So I love this quote because This quote scared me to death when I was at Microsoft, and I think also provides one of the greatest opportunities now that I'm in a startup. And it talks a little bit about distribution and growth from some pretty reputable folks, right? Andreessen Horowitz. But it's basically the battle between every startup and incumbent comes down to whether or not the startup gets or executes on distribution before that incumbent gets innovation. Now think about it. All of us here today, if we have a startup, we want to grow, right? We want to develop. We want to get and understand distribution. Think about the companies that we're all well aware of today in the startup world that have just executed on distribution. To some degree, they've disrupted the distribution of the current model as the whole basis of their business. Anybody want to throw one out? A company that's disrupted distribution, changed the way that we get something, a product, a good, or a service? Uber, Amazon, Tesla, Netflix, one of my favorites. Who's that? Access Century. Yeah. So think about the companies. Uber's a perfect example, right? They've completely disrupted the way in which transportation works, and they've got bolder ambitions. Netflix. I saw a documentary the other day, and it was showing like the last Blockbuster store on the planet. Was it somewhere like in Alaska or something? They still had a Blockbuster store. It was like the very last one. Now, it wasn't very long ago. That was like an event. You know, we'd go to Blockbuster, we would walk around for hours looking for one movie, and then they'd be out of it, and then we'd go home and cry, and we don't have that problem anymore, right? Amazon started out with a very traditional kind of non-tech thing in the way that we distribute books, and now look at what they built. Again, distribution, if you look at the book that was referenced earlier, Third Wave, right? It talks about that as being a key element as far as how things get done. And in our world, I think about part of our mission is we want to distribute ag knowledge in a different way. We think that there's a shortage of ag expertise, but of that shortage, there's a whole lot of it right here in the Midwest where we live. And we think in order to feed a hungry planet, we need to distribute that knowledge in a meaningful way. And that's a big part of our mission. We think that unlocking the human element of distribution of ag knowledge is core to our mission at our company. But I would also say that this notion of distribution is a fundamental opportunity for all of us as entrepreneurs. We have an opportunity to really get and understand distribution in a way that's disruptive. Brian, if we think about the insurance tech space, a lot of the reason I think the big companies want to invest or partner in the insurance tech space is they realize that insurance fundamentally, and financial services as a whole, has a lot of distribution problems that perhaps entrepreneurs can solve. So how do we go about tackling some of those things? And when we think about growth and the notion of how do we get distribution, how do we get users and usage, I thought it would be kind of interesting for us to hear from Alex Schultz, the VP of Growth at Facebook. And how many of you have signed up for Y Combinator's massive online course that they're teaching this year for startups? Anybody? Am I the only nerd that signed up for that? So highly would recommend it. So combination of Y Combinator and Stanford, they put together this massive online course where on a weekly basis they have a number of different speakers. And this is kind of the first time that they've opened it up as a massive online course that you can sign up and enroll for. And I love it because it's like on demand, the best people from Stanford and some of the different startups that come in and speak about some of the fundamental challenges we all have. And they did a couple of series around growth. And I thought it was really interesting because a lot of us today, we've talked about how to acquire customers, right? How do we get those first new customers? Listen to what Alex here says about the fundamental driver of growth. Can we go back to that and maybe you can help me play that video? There you go. It's thinking. I'll give it just another minute before we assume that because I'm a Microsoft alum, the PowerPoint gods are going to let me down today, which is typically the case. We might come back to that. How's that sound, guys? All right, so his fundamental thought was, he gives an hour lecture on growth. The number one driving factor of growth. Anybody want to take a stab at that at Facebook? Retention. Retention. How do we keep the customers that we've already signed up? And for those of you that are in a software as a service business, as we are, you start thinking about retention and how do we retain the existing customers. Let's assume that from our previous session, we get everything right, we nail the funnel, and we get these customers in. Our biggest factor in terms of long-term growth is how many of those customers do we retain versus how many of those do we churn. And this is a big challenge when we think about software as a service companies. I always tell people we're competing for the 20% of people's time that they're not spending on things like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter when they look at their smartphones, right? There's about 20% of kind of their eyeball time that all of the rest of technology competes with. And I'm competing for that time with something sexy like agriculture support, where they might want to play a game that Brad makes or something else, right? And so our goal is to say, how do we keep that person engaged and how do we keep them retained? And retention and our retention practices become equally, if not more important than anything we're doing on kind of the attraction side of our business. And when we think about retention, one of the students in this class asked him, they said, well, what is it that keeps you coming back to Facebook? Why is it that when you open Facebook, you keep checking in? It's to keep up with our friends, right? That's the biggest reason we all go to Facebook. It's not for the advertising or whatnot. It's to keep up with our friends and family. So Facebook has this thing called a network effect that keeps us engaged. We want to go there not just to post what we're doing, but to see what everybody else is up to. And one of the fundamentals of engaged users and retaining users is asking yourself, does my business, does my software have this sort of wow factor that not only causes me to want to use it once, but causes me to want to use it again? And as a company that specializes in support and customer service, this is one of our big fundamental concerns, is how do we keep people coming back and using our service? And we had to start thinking about ways to say, how can we not just be the fire alarm, if you will, that I pull when I need help as a farmer, but how can we encourage communication, kind of this ongoing broadcast communication that we now have in our service? And I think it's a big pivotal moment for our company to recognize that engagement happens sort of over time by encouraging people to come back and to leverage your service. And the cost of acquisition of customers is high for most startups. And so you want to make sure that that customer scenario is engaged. Did we ever get that to work, guys? Yeah. Okay, go ahead if you want to play it. Almost. Okay, we'll come back to it. No big deal. All right. So let's talk about those kind of first customers. About a year ago, we were launching our service for the first time, and I was so excited, right? Because we finally had our service sort of working, and I thought, awesome. I've got this vision of what our service is. A customer also has some expectations about what your service is. And most of the time, this is what that interaction looks like, right? The customer thinks something's happening, and in the background, it's kind of your first date, right? And I think that one of the challenges we run into as startups is not choosing wisely our first customers. I love the discussion this morning about going in and telling those customers that, hey, we're going to be a you can join the club or whatever he called it, where he went and sat outside their office and kind of learned all of their fundamental flaws. Brilliance. That is awesome. But choosing those first customers wisely is important. And I would tell you today that we made some mistakes there that I wish I could roll back in time a little bit, because we had some larger customers in our space that were really saying, hey, this customer service situation is a problem, and when you have something, even if it's beta, bring it to us. And we did, and it was beta, and it was like playing with lighter fluid for a few days. It's hard to recover from that, and now you want to go back to them and say, hey, we're all grown up, right? We've been at this for a whole 12 months. Give us another shot. It is hard to reacquire a customer who has misexpectations for what your service delivers. And so one fundamental thing that I would say is to learn from our mistakes, in that you want to go after the right customers initially, people that fundamentally believe in your mission and are willing to help you work out the kinks, if you will, with the product. And once you have those first customers, they can do great things for you. But picking the wrong first customers is a huge mistake for startups. If you decide that you're going to go whale fishing when you really should be fishing for, fish this size, you're going to find that that's a problem. And I think especially for startups who maybe are selling into that Fortune 500 space, you might find that you're just handing them over your ideas, your problems, especially if they have a development company. So be very mindful about picking those first customers and making sure that you can meet or exceed expectations. When I was at Microsoft, the early days of Google, we would make fun of Google because they had like 30 products and they said, oh, they're all in beta. And Microsoft and IBM and Oracle, we'd go in and we'd be like, you can't take Google seriously. Look at all those products. They still list them on their website as beta. That was brilliance by Google. Brilliance. Because the customer's expectations was, it's not quite done yet, it's a work in progress, I'll give them a little grace, a little latitude, but I'm going to get users and usage that will help me drive requirements, as opposed to the mentality of some enterprise software players, which were like, I don't really want to hear the customer's feedback, I just want to build it, hand it over to them, and they'll keep buying it because they always would. If I could go back in time, I would have put my product out there early, my MVP. I would have gone after some of those customers, but I would have listed it as beta to kind of help set those early expectations. And it would have probably made reacquiring some of those customers easier. Now, we're getting those customers back, but we're getting them back, thankfully, based upon references. And so choosing those first customers wisely is important. I want you to meet one of our first customers. This is David. David is a precision ag specialist for a John Deere dealer out in the Pacific Northwest. And he's kind of, when we think about our profile of a customer, he's one of our ideal folks, right? This guy is an expert in his area. If you happen to farm in Oregon, you probably have had this guy on speed dial because he's got all of the answers. And David, I don't know if he knows it or not, but he was one of the first people to actually write a check and pay for our software. And this was in the early stage, and he was a small provider, relatively small customer. But he saw the vision of what we were trying to do and believed in it and gave us a lot of good feedback. And 8 months after he started using the product, 8 months, that's a long time, by the way. This wasn't his initial reaction to our service. It was, oh, wow, this is better than sliced bread. It took him a little while to kind of get there. But he basically said, I fully understand what this product is, what its mission is. And this is an excerpt from an email that he sent unsolicited to the largest ag equipment dealer association president in Canada, whom he happened to know. And so finding that first customer who gets your product, understands your product, and then is willing to communicate that to their friends, to people that they care about, their associations, is important. And the difference between David and maybe some of those other early customers is we'd set the right expectations early on. So he communicates that to what is now the largest ag equipment dealer association in North America. And the president of that organization endorses our product largely based upon the feedback of his members. And if you'll notice, this is the president's comments. They look really similar to David's. So when we start thinking about really good growth, part of the way is to figure out who are those first early customers. How can we get them to share what it is about our product? How can we get them to be ambassadors for it? And then will they share that within associations, within affiliations that they know? And for us, in a vertical market, we talked about this at the breakout, having this understanding, if you're selling into healthcare, financial services, education, real estate, insurance, where do my customers live? What types of associations are they involved in? What types of LinkedIn groups are they in? And then where can I identify some of those key influencers who might help me get endorsements from associations? I've found that associations love startups because they're looking for ways to bring new knowledge to their membership, and they're also looking for ways to be innovative. So the Western Equipment Dealer Association, we love them, but they're not like startup tech type folks. But when they find something that brings profitability and efficiency to their members, they're quick to endorse it. And I would say that endorsements like this have become a key part of our distribution strategy. We have very specific goals around associations, organizations that we want to make sure that we get an endorsement from. And it's this broader thinking that we want our customers to be our first and best ambassadors. And I think that should be all of our approach, right? Again, kind of thinking of Tori's comments this morning with Rocket Referral. It's fantastic that their customers, again, have been great ambassadors of their product. The cool part about leveraging your customer as an ambassador, or in Tori's case, their customers as an investor, is you get the ability to leverage the power of word of mouth. And for us as a young company, we may not get discovered any other way besides word of mouth. We can do all the things we want in terms of social media, et cetera, but word of mouth tends to be a great influencer. And also think about the way we buy. How many of you read at least 2 or 3 Amazon reviews before you click? All of us do, right? Even if we're not buying on Amazon, we still go and read the reviews. That was a pretty smart idea on their part. So think about the way that you like to buy, and the fact that you typically, if somebody came up and said, Kirk, this is a great product, I think you should check it out, and I know him, and we have a personal relationship, he probably wouldn't, he'd at least give it a look, right? So word of mouth becomes a super key influencer, not only to attract that customer, but that is typically the decision trigger. Meaning if somebody's endorsed your product, I find this all the time, somebody will get on and say, well, such and such company that is in our peer group is using your product, they said it works great. So as long as I don't screw up the sales process, they're probably going to convert. Now that doesn't mean that sometimes we don't still screw up the sales process, but my point is, independent of what you do as a sales professional, that word of mouth referral is going to be more and more important. And we also find that referrals close faster, referrals stay with you longer, so their long-term customer value much, much better than somebody that just randomly and passively came in and used your product. So again, thinking about your customer as an ambassador. Now, we're all startups or in that early stage. The return on investment, here's what I really like about referral marketing and affiliate marketing and partner marketing, is the ROI on that relative to other places we can spend our money. We've all got a finite amount of resources, and sometimes when we do, social marketing, and we look at an email campaign, for instance, it might be a paid email campaign, what is our click rates and our open rates? They're in like the small percentages for most companies, but yet we have to pay whether those are, happening or not. The beauty of referral marketing or partner marketing is a lot of times if we're giving a mutual benefit both to the person that signs up and the person who referred them, we only pay for that when somebody converts. And so what I love as a frugal entrepreneur is that we pay for things that actually execute. We're not paying for a lot of things that don't execute. So, if you ask, would I spend thousands of dollars on sort of a traditional agency or media buy that is hard to track and hard to determine if it converts? What I love about referral and affiliate marketing is if I'm being rewarded for recommending a product for Kirk, I only pay if he actually signs up for the service. And so we look at referral and affiliate marketing as a really solid ROI in terms of alternatives. Any comments on that? Thoughts? But just think about paying for conversions and what your conversion rates are on traditional sales, traditional media, et cetera, relative to ROIs for referral. We think that's a pretty powerful approach. Now, there's a lot of confusion about what is a referral and what is an affiliate. I want to talk through what the difference is. By the way, both are good. As startups, we would take lots of both of these, would we not? One of them is a little bit better than the other. But if we think about our affiliate marketing, and again, this might be associations, this might be work that you're doing with partners. Essentially, our assumption is you're probably paying some portion of your margin to them to sell through, if you will, or provide your product. Meaning you're paying a commission, you're paying a distribution fee, something, and the motivation for the person who's pushing your product, be it a partner channel, what have you, is largely financial, okay? So number one, you're probably gonna pay more for that affiliation type marketing. And number two, the motivation of the person who's pushing your product is financial, and that comes through. They'll sell that to anybody, but they will largely do it because they're getting paid to do it. The flip side of referral marketing is, wow, I have found this new software at Denim, and it is like the rock star software for all of insurance tech when it comes to social. And I want all my friends to know about it because I care about my friends, and it's so good that I want them to see the same benefits. That is a whole different deal, right? That is referral marketing. That's me caring enough about this other person's business to say, I want to introduce you to something that's innovative. Now, by the way, they probably didn't have to pay me as much, if you will, for that referral process because that's not how I make money. But it is the way in which the best acquisition of customers comes. So I always tell people you want both as a young company, but the more you can do on this notion of referral marketing, the better off you are. The more you can get your customers themselves to just naturally want to be ambassadors and share your product, the better off it is. And again, the motivations are different, and your long-term sustainability is different. Because financially, partner marketing is expensive. When I was at Microsoft, I had a couple of different stints where I led partner marketing, and we spent a lot of money, both in terms of commissions, training, partner retention, because you'd have partners that were selling not only your CRM product, but they were also selling Salesforce or whatever it was. Those are expensive channels to manage. And there's a few companies here in Des Moines that have done a great job with what I would call kind of the partner marketing. I think Bird Dog is one that I hear has done a really nice job of partner marketing, and that's fantastic. But know that there's a cost of that, and you've got to have people that are committed to it. Typically, you've got to have a partner development lead, somebody who's trained to every week be training up partners. And what we find is, again, you want both of these, but referral marketing is definitely one that we like the most. So return on your time. This is probably the thing I wrestle with the most in a small startup versus a big company. In a big company, if you had a good idea, there was always an army of people who would actually go and execute on that idea to make it happen. That doesn't happen in the startup space. We have plenty of ideas. We just don't have the time to execute on them. Is anybody else like that, where you've got this list of things that you're like, I just want to, chip off one thing off of the list. I always tell people as a startup, I've learned that, I've got 3 or 4 things that we figured out and that we do well every day. And then I've got this whole long list of things that we haven't figured out that someday I hope to get to, and I'm just keep, putting them in Trello, right? Per Levi's coaching, just put it in Trello, eventually it'll happen. So I'm keeping those lists in hopes that we can execute someday. All of us have a shortage of time. And I think this time factor is almost bigger than capital for a lot of us as far as the limiting factor on our growth. And choosing where we spend our time is a big part of how well we execute. So I'll be honest, I'm in this dilemma right now. I know that from a direct sales perspective, I love talking to our customers. And when I'm on talking with our customers, I can hear the cash register ring, right? I love that conversion approach. Plus, I love hearing their feedback on what we do well, how we could get better, all those good things. And so I love selling, and I hope you've got somebody on your team that loves to sell a customer every day, because you need that. I also know that the arc on our execution would be better if I could train an army of other sellers that are in a channel. So specifically in the ag space, there's lots of great sellers out there already. Why can't those people be making money recommending AgriSync as kind of the lone ranger in the customer service space? We don't have a lot of competitors. We've got a lot of potential sellers, potential ambassadors. But I know to do that from past history that I've got to commit time to maintaining that channel, educating that channel, coaching them up on how to position the product, all of those things. So what we call channel readiness. And so a lot of times I look at those two top things as, gosh, do I speak directly to customers, or do I speak indirectly to a channel provider who might then influence 10 customers? Or do I get really smart and hire 2 people for each of those jobs, which is what some of you are thinking, which is in the long-term plan. But in the early stages, you've got to divide up your time. The bottom 2, I think, are also equally important in today's world. And that is this notion of content marketing and marketing tool automation. And we've talked a lot about the digital world we live in and how to create content. So, again, I look at the guys at Rocket Referrals. Carl, I don't know if he's still here or if they've left, but early on I saw some work that they did, and they have just an awesome approach to content marketing. The ebook is one example that they brought up, but Carl has actually written a ton of articles that get published in insurance magazines because they're hungry for expert content. And so they've really done a nice job in a vertical of what I would call content marketing, becoming the expert, and instead of having to buy a full-page ad in some boring insurance magazine, they're featuring that content based upon the fact that they're a known expert. And content marketing is hard because it's kind of, as a startup, the stuff that you do in your off hours, right? It's in the evenings after the kids go to bed, in my case, that you sit there and go, oh gosh, I've got to write a blog post, or I've got to go put together this type of white paper. Content marketing, I think, is very hard. And certainly you can outsource all of that. I haven't really found startups that do well outsourcing their own sort of content expertise. Having the notion that everybody on your team is an author is a thought that I like, and that means what are we doing to make sure everybody on the team is an author? Not everybody's going to get published in, prestigious magazines like Precision Farming Dealer, right? Some we might just have posts to Facebook or Twitter, but figure out where are my customers spending their time and what are they reading, and what am I doing in terms of content marketing? And then the other piece is on marketing tool automation. I've always wished that we would have just kind of a nerdy hour or 2 conference of all the startups in Des Moines where we each came and said, here's 2 or 3 tools that we're using in our business that are making me smarter, right? Tools like, or services like FunnelWise, Marketo, Zapier, things of that nature. And then, are you really good at it? In my case, I'm always trying to find somebody that's an expert at a certain solution. So I was picking on Levi earlier because he helped me get good at Trello. It took him an hour and a half one day, but he was kind enough to say, I want to show you a way to get better. But this notion of marketing tool automation, companies that get really good at that, they free up cycles for much more strategic things. So any comments on return on time? Does anybody else wrestle with this? Meaning, which one of these quadrants do they spend their time, or am I the only one? Okay. I think it's a big challenge for us. All right, so we talked a little bit about the notion of understanding who your customer is. We think that video is a great way to sort of relate and convey to our customers who typically have relatively short attention spans on what value we provide. How do we get it in the customer's words in a 30, 60-second soundbite? We live in a world, at least in our sector, where the experts that we're trying to sell to typically will not take, an hour and a half, 2 hours to read a comprehensive white paper on customer service. But what they will do is they will watch a quick video that highlights somebody that looks like them, has the same issues they have, maybe they can identify with. And we use video a lot, I know Kaylee does as well, in just communicating our use cases. And I think especially if you're in a vertical market, figuring out your persona, right? What is the persona that you're after? And then identifying and capturing those video testimonials is a super key scenario. And you're in good shape on this one? Go ahead. I'll let you push the button. Yes. It should just play if you click on the video or the picture of him. Oh, maybe not. I'll let you click on the actual photo of him on the right. There you go, down at the bottom there's a little play button.
Precision Ag department at JCOX Implement. We're using AgriSync as a resource for our customers. When we're at a different area and our customers need something stat, we can use AgriSync to dial in their issue on their monitors or any electronic aspects that are needed. We've also used it back and forth as from text to text and troubleshooting within the company. So really looking out for our customers and just trying to find something that's reliable and accessible to them.
Now, Malik is never going to be an actor, by the way. But can I relate to him if I'm in this line of work? Absolutely, right? It's 105 degrees that day in Worthington, Minnesota. He's probably been in 3 or 4 messy situations, but he solved a couple of issues with our service, and he'll make his daughter's softball game tonight. And again, showing sort of this persona of your users and not trying to gloss it up, but find people who are actually in the trench, who are actually doing those types of things. And we find that these video testimonials of our customers, of all the things that we do with digital, social, meaning we can dress up and create these very fancy type things, doesn't matter. You get the smart guy who they can all kind of relate to, that does the same type of role, they get that. And in our world, we try to have folks that, some have the red, some have the green, some have different. We're very conscious of making sure that our video testimonials work in that regard. So, and likewise, we want to make sure that the green guys also think that we fit their approach. RDO Equipment, John Deere's largest dealer in North America. Again, a customer who started out early with us, gave us a ton of feedback, and now is standardizing on our product. And they're definitely one of these customers who is big. They're large. They have a huge marketing presence, and they've probably done as much, if not more, to market our product than we have. But finding those early reference customers, and in our case, we make it really easy for them to give us a quote, allow us to do a video testimonial. I can remember when we were gathering testimonials at Microsoft, we would hand the customer like this 5-page agreement that, I don't know what it said in it, never sue us please or something like that. Be easy to provide references for, because what we found is, again, customers in our world, we're showing them how to hopefully deliver better customer service. they want to highlight that, right? Who wouldn't want to say that they care about customer service? Same way with Rocket Referrals. Who wouldn't want to say that we care about communicating with our clients? So finding those reference points and, again, putting pictures to it, making those real people that you can leverage in your presentations. We found that to be super valuable. All right, let's talk a little bit about two different scenarios on scale. Because we're always in a hurry, we're always trying to figure out how can we optimize the day, and I think Seth does a nice job of, on the left, talking about things that you don't want to automate, that you don't want to scale. Thinking about the way to personalize kind of your business. So, writing that handwritten note to an employee, to a customer, when they've got a special day, take the time to do that. Take the time to sort of make those personal scenarios. He talks about, when you've got a long-term patient that needs to hear that you're planning on how she'll beat the cancer, you don't sort of rush through that discussion. When you've got a customer who's got a problem with your product or service, stop, pause, listen, soak that up. My point is, those are what I call those, moments in time when, as entrepreneurs, we need to stop all the noise and listen and be diligent about what our response is. And sometimes it's those crucial conversations with employees, with customers, but they need to understand that we care. And that's a lot more important than sometimes the next bell or whistle. We were on with a big cooperative up in Canada last week, and their first comment of the meeting was, wow, you guys really care about us individually. Somebody, had a challenge or issue, and we followed up right away, and they said, they were measuring us. They're still in a trial of our service, but a big part of their measurement for us was, what's our customer service approach like? We're a customer service platform. Do we live that in our values? I always tell our team, we kind of have to be held to a higher standard because we're selling customer service software. So the expectation is we take the time to make it personal and support customers that have questions for us. Now, I think to do that and do that well as an entrepreneur, you have to be a ninja on the backside of automating all the stuff that doesn't really matter, that doesn't need your immediate time. And the best people are the ones who have freed up enough of their time that they can take these crucial conversations with customers and know on the back end that their drip campaign is being automated, or that their social media event calendar is happening automatically. And so we talk a lot about tools that can help us scale. These are a few that we leverage within our organization. Some of these that were mentioned earlier today as far as CRM and MailChimp and MailList. Referral software, we're just getting into this space. So tools like Ambassador or iDev Affiliate, obviously social tools. Again, we use a lot of video tools. We always try to say, what can we do with video in 30 seconds that is quicker, faster, and more meaningful than a 2 or 3 page white paper that our customers may never see? So I think as young companies, you want to look at things and say, all right, I've got two approaches. One, what can I automate? And then if I do that automation well, what does that allow me to do in terms of freeing up time to be more human, more personal? Think about the best people that you follow on social media. Where's Benovator at? He's in here somewhere, right? Part of what I love about following him on social media is he's real. He's human. And to do that and do that well, you've got to, on the backside, have been able to automate some things. And again, a lot of these are a work in progress for us, or more aspirational, but I think that's really important as a young company who's trying to build a brand. So before we open up for questions, I want to talk a little bit just about a few things that I learned as far as getting prepared to share with you a little bit today about our journey as a young company. And again, the nice part about today, we've heard from companies who are at different phases of their business, and we'll hear more here soon from Ben at Dwala. But think a little bit about where your organization is at and what is on kind of your checklist of things that you say, hey, I'm going to try to figure that out this quarter, this month. These are some of the things that for us, we're absolutely trying to figure out. What is our defined kind of retention strategy? Again, back at the very beginning Facebook video, did you guys ever get that up, by the way? Sorry, I keep like giving you 2 seconds worth of, I'd love to have them see what Alex said at Facebook about retention. But retention is so critical, and you're not typically thinking about it right out of the gate. When it comes to roost is, a year into your contracts or a couple years into your contracts, and you're saying, what is our retention rate? What is our cost of acquisition? What are we doing? Go ahead and play that video from Alex. We'll hear what Facebook thinks about the importance of retention.
Have a growth team at Facebook. So what matters most to growth? The single most important thing to growth is retention. Adam commented on this in his talk, and he showed you cohorts from some real company. But here is a stylized cohort of how you should look at retention. The number of days from acquisition is on the x-axis. On the y-axis is the percent of people who are still monthly active. I care a lot about using monthly active, not daily active, not weekly active. There are really good arguments for using daily active that people say all the time because it's about intensity of usage. But what really, really matters is that you've got skin in the game and people come back to your product at least once a month. And then you build on top of that engagement, revenue, whatever your key metrics are, which we'll get to in a minute. But firstly, I believe monthly active is the most important thing. The second thing is, how do you really calculate it?
And he goes into this long, complicated discussion about how to calculate retention, and there's actually multiple theories there. My point is, retention is really important. And start thinking about that before it becomes an issue. What are you doing to nurture those customers that you already have? What are you doing to get what's called negative churn? Meaning, I started out with a customer using 5 seats of our software, and at renewal, they want to have 10 seats. How do I get that type of growth? Especially if you're in the software as a service space, these types of metrics are really important. And they're not easy metrics to start capturing on day one. But once you've kind of got your product settled out and you feel like, hey, from a product perspective, the product's solid, we've got those first set of customers, we're now starting to think a lot about what are we doing in terms of retention and in company growth, meaning if we've got our foot in the door, what are we doing to get that next set of users? And specifically, we look at, do we have a network effect? Does your service allow customers to invite other customers into the product? Is there an easy way for people to share that they're having a good experience? In our case, similar to a Facebook or LinkedIn invite, a farmer can invite in additional advisors into our service. That's a much more powerful invite than a sales call from us. Meaning if they're customers inviting them to use our product, that's going to have some stickiness to it. What are we doing in terms of association endorsements? We talked about this a little bit. And again, I'll try to give some examples. A great tool that we use with our development team for video-based collaboration called Loom. They've got this really simple little widget inside of their tool that allows me to easily share the fact that this is a cool tool. And does your product have an ability to share or bring about a network effect in terms of referrals? What are you doing in terms of video testimonials? I just trained up all of our new interns from Iowa State, and one of their weekly metrics is capturing video testimonials, more testimonials like Malik, that people can actually relate to. And then also, what do you have in terms of website testimonials? If you go to Rocket Referrals website, if you go to our website, several others, try to have those referrals on your site that people can basically relate to. How easy is it for a customer to give you feedback? At FunnelWise, they were talking about the sort of chat widgets. We leverage those as well. I'm shocked at how easy that is for the random person to give us feedback or to ask a question. So part of it is, are you where your customers are at the right time? And then what type of feedback? Are you doing really good content-driven marketing? Again, think back to the articles that Carl writes and your blog posts, your things that will bring attention to your scenario. The last thing is a give-get discount strategy. Let me elaborate on this. as a young company, you will probably at times have to do some discounting in order to get those first customers. What are you getting back for that discount? Okay, if a customer is asking you for a discount, do they want to buy your product? Yes, right? They wouldn't bother asking you for a discount if they, but maybe they're probably bringing up, well, your product doesn't do this yet, or you haven't done this integration, or whatever it might be. My point is, if you ever give a discount to a new customer, ask, what am I getting back for that? Am I getting a referral? Am I getting a reference? Will they introduce me to 2 or 3 of their peers? Have that sort of defined out as part of your funnel, because that becomes a very powerful marketing piece. And we do this a lot with customers when they say, well, gosh, I wish you did this. And I say, well, we don't yet, because we're kind of like other folks. We like to stay focused on what we do and do well. But we will say, hey, if you will help us with either a reference or an introduction to this peer, we'll work with you on a first-year discount for a seat or 2 or whatever that might be. My point is, have a strategy around the way in which you as an organization, if you do discounting, what's that look like? And I think that's really important. A lot of companies just say, oh, yeah, I guess I'll, without any sort of recourse. That's a really dangerous, slippery slope, and you don't want to go there. So have a strategy around what is in it for you as a company in terms of if there is a discount. But these are, again, some of the checklist pieces. The biggest takeaway, I would say, for growth and distribution is figuring out where your customers are living, how you can get your customer to become an ambassador, and then what are you doing in terms of your retention strategy. Last thing I will say is, I know it's a challenging at times, but I've been on both sides of this, and this is way more fun. All of us got up today, and as stressed out, as tired as whatever you were, you had a goal, a mission in life, right? And maybe you're pushing the rock uphill, but cubicle land in corporate America will always be there waiting for you and be glad to take you in, and be absolutely boring for most of you, right? So, I appreciate the opportunity to come and share some of the lessons that I've had on both sides of this, and also some of the things that we're learning as an organization. The thing that I'm most appreciative of, that as a company, we decided to build here, right? To do something here in Iowa. Obviously, as an ag tech company, we're biased. We think this is the best place on the planet to build an ag tech startup. Not just because we've got the ag, kind of enterprise surrounding us here in Iowa, but more so because of the broader tech community, the broader startup community. The fact that there's a lot of smart people in the room who have taken time with me personally to coach me on different areas of our business, and for that I'm extremely grateful. So with that, I'll thank you and take questions. Any questions? Yes.
You talked about some of the tools that you marketers could use. Where do you see those tools going in the next 5 years, as far as the automation kind of thing?
Yeah, the question was around automation tools and where do we see that sort of going. I see a ton of goodness happening with bots and different things like that that will help us as marketers get smarter. And are you with one of those types of companies, right? Yeah. Well, I'm playing right into your hand. So what company is it so that we can all kind of learn from it?
Solutions. Sedema Solutions.
All right, fantastic. I'm generally excited about our potential as young companies to kind of market with the big boys based upon automation tools, bot frameworks, things of that nature. We're actually doing some work on that area in our customer service platform. But this notion of, again, going back to my first slide about the notion that we've got to figure out as young companies distribution before our bigger competitors figure out innovation, it comes down to things like the marketing pieces. We've got to be willing to try new tools, new processes, new approaches. And those of you that know me or hang around me every now and then, I know Josh sitting in the back room, we get the joy of watching co-ed soccer together. And I'm always saying, hey, what are you using as far as new tools? What are you seeing out there that's helpful to your business? I think we've always got to be open to those new tools, because I know from my previous life that big Fortune 500 companies, change is their most painful thing, right? If I come in and decide to disrupt or change their process or put a new tool in play, that might take months or years. Whereas a startup, we've got to be quick adopters. We've got to be able to consume that change and turn it into ROI very quickly, and that's what we do, right? We don't have all this legacy kind of baggage that we have to worry about. We've got to be quick adopters. So yeah, definitely share more during the break with some of the things. Yes?
Casey, Tori from Rocket Referrals talked earlier about the loud customers, those that sometimes can provide a distraction to developing a core product that can be useful across the whole customer base. I'm interested in your thoughts about those loud customers and those that are maybe asking for features that are a distraction from the core product.
Yeah, I typically tell them the same thing I tell my wife. Love me for what I am today, not for what you want me to be, right? Now, the conversation goes a different path with my wife after 20 years, but I think this is super important for us as startups to stay focused on our core path. And I'm guilty of it. I love the next bell and whistle like the next guy. And especially when I hear a customer say, gosh, if you could do this and this, then, you know, it's all rainbows and unicorns. But my first question is typically, are they an existing customer today? Are they paying us for what we do at our core today? If they're not, it goes in a certain list. If they're an existing paying customer and we see that by unlocking this new feature, this new capability, that we could do more, let's dig in, let's learn, let's understand their requirements, how complicated would that be? But I think as a startup, you've got to get good at saying, no, we don't do that. And you know, in Tori's world, dropping the mic and leaving the but we've got to be good at focus, because I can tell you there's lots and lots of big companies that will develop those custom tools and widgets. That's not the world we want to be in, right? That doesn't scale very well. But there's a way to ask. I always tell customers, well, first, I'd like you to be using and paying for our core service, because all of our roadmap-driven events that we put into our product, we prioritize customers that are using the service as we are today. So, great question. Yes?
Hey, Casey, great talk, great remarks. Thanks. You. By the way, I paid you with a tweet earlier,
hey,
so thanks
anytime.
for the denim shout-out. So technical question and then a follow-on. So technical question, I've noticed on your website you've got a quick little Drift plugin, kind of this, hey, how can I help you? And it's got your photo there.
Right.
And Molly from FunnelWise likewise has a similar little plug-in there with Molly's photo there. So for you guys, is it just because you're small and we're startups, it's your photo, or is there something like strategic about putting a leader or the founder's photo there?
We make sure that both my co-founder and I are always, we're plugged into that. So that pipes right into Slack so that, you know, and I was answering Drift questions today directly through that. But we also have our customer success team in there. But I don't think you can be too human of a company in the early stages. Meaning, initially I was kind of like, okay, do we put ourselves out there personally on some of these scenarios? I think you do. Because when that customer reaches out, number one, they typically get the right answer right away. But they also are like, oh, wow, I look and I just gave feedback directly to the founder. That might actually get something done.
Right.
Now, in the long term, does that scale very well? No. I mean, I think in our case, we've got our customer success team that's on there as well, so the tool itself kind of rotates in and out. But this notion of being available to your customers in the early stage is, I think, really important. And if I see a customer that's got good feedback, sometimes I will just get directly live with them as quickly as I can to try to get that feedback.
So quick follow-up, and it's related to channel partnerships, channel selling. So how do you prioritize, if you think about profitability, revenue generation and profitability trade-offs related to direct selling versus channel partnerships with potential thinner margins? How do you prioritize kind of where you place focus and all of that?
Yeah, so we recognize, and as a company, we've kind of thought about our channel distribution and said, as a percentage of net revenue, what percentage of that margin would we be willing to put into a channel relationship? And I think that's going to be different, by the way, for all companies. So you want to look at what your unit economics are, what your direct cost of sale is. So meaning if I reach out to 100 of those companies directly and acquire them, what's my cost of acquisition versus if I reach out to 10 partners who then go reach out to those same, they each reach out to 10 companies, and how do I make that both profitable for them? So we look at what our cost of acquisition is, and that's usually a good indicator of what types of margin we could, provide to a channel partner. And that varies based upon your company and your cost of acquisition. But I also think that there are places, as we've launched in a couple of international countries, I think we're going to be a much better provider through a channel in some of those countries than we would be if we tried to do that all direct. And so channel economics come into play. And then what, putting in the process so that you can train up and maintain that channel is super important. Massive companies were really built on channel economics. Microsoft's a good example, but there were several, right, that have that capability. And I think channel economics of the 90s is sort of referral marketing of our current state, and that is now that we're all, so connected. I really feel like the ability to do referral marketing is both going to be more cost effective, but maybe a little stickier alternative. So, great question. Yeah.
Some of our customers are also startup companies, and we have developed products and launched successfully, and wanted to give testimonials. When I asked, they said it's first to do in their list, but they want to be invisible now because they have full-time jobs. And they're testing the proof of concept, very happy with us, and we are developing more for them. So what is your suggestion in that situation? How can we let others know we are doing things?
Sure. The question was around, basically, you might have people that want to be references but don't want to give their sort of full identity. Obviously, if they'll give sort of full identity and a Twitter handle, that's best, right? Because now other people can sort of dig in and relate, say, hey, is that somebody that aligns to me? But, we sort of track several telemedicine companies because sometimes people say, oh, you're the telemedicine of agriculture. So we watch how they do some of their referrals, and none of the telemedicine companies ever put first, last name, anything of obviously patients who use telemedicine. And so they anonymize their referrals, and they'll say, a sick guy in Iowa said, or whatever it might be. So there are ways around that, but I think the bigger piece is whatever your referral or testimonials are, sort of draw up what your profile of your customer is and get really specific, because when you've got a good profile of who your ideal customer is, that's a great internal training tool for your sales professionals. It's great when you're putting together marketing materials. I know in our world, if we're putting together a digital marketing campaign, we're like, okay, what's our profile? Is it going to a farmer or an advisor? If it's going to an advisor, what type of advisor? All of a sudden, you can get really specific, and your ROI or your execution on that will be a lot better. So, good question. Other questions? Yes?
Okay, so thanks for coming. And you've kind of turned into a mentor. So as you're, a startup and you know a lot of things, you still have questions and you still take a leap of faith. Where do you turn for your advice or for a mentor or to learn things that you don't know? Because there's a lot we don't know from a startup perspective, like maybe accounting or marketing, or you've got this product, do you want to go this way with it or that way? And you can't really do it by trial and error.
Right. No, it's a great question. And I think mentorship, I'm a big believer in having mentors and also trying to be a mentor, because I think each of us probably have some gifts to give. We just got to find the right people that need them at the right time. I think mentors change over time. So, while we were here today, one of my mentors in the ag tech space, reached out and said, hey, McDonald's, 8 o'clock in the morning, got some ideas for you. I can't wait for that meeting because I know my friend Dan will probably pour into me because he's 10 years ahead of me in every facet of business, life, etc. At the same time, it's important for me to pour back into other young companies. So a couple of them that are here in the room and I see that are, like my friend Steven who just launched Tervis yesterday. I'm proud of him, right? He's a good guy. He's got a great product. What can we be doing to encourage him? And mentors who are also in the entrepreneur space are the most valuable. So other people who are trying to build a business, those are the mentors that I seek out the most. And I think you've got to be deliberate about that and finding mentors who are ahead of you in your facet of whatever you're doing. I'm always trying to find mentors who are founders because I really find that I can get real with them about the challenges of starting a business, and they typically have a couple of things that they can contribute. But I also think if you do have a company and somebody reaches out, what are you doing to pour back into them? We do a lot with the entrepreneurship program up at Iowa State University, with the Apex program out at Waukee. I learn more from those young people than probably I give back to them some days. But I think that's part of the joy of having entrepreneurship is this ability to share some best practices. And you've given me some pretty good advice on a number of things that we've had. So all of us in the room have some sort of gifts to give. Part of what building a good community is seeking those people out. Hopefully you met somebody here today that you're like, hey, I'm going to catch you for coffee next week and share some of the things that you can offer them. But mentorship's a big deal. Questions? All right. Well, I think we've got a break. Miss Kaylee, do you want to come up and transition? Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Casey. He's good, isn't he? Good stuff. One more round of applause. Thanks, Casey.